Welcome to my channel. My name is Jimmy Cadillo. I hope that you are having a blessed day the same way that I'm having a blessed day. The good Lord upstairs gave us a day today, so we're going to make the most out of it. And today, what we'll be talking about is something that is very personal. Really, up until recently, I even got emotional talking about it, to be honest with you. And I really couldn't really talk about it too much just because it was something that was kind of painful for me to talk about, right? It brought back, just memories that I wasn't too fond of. And here's what it is I'm talking about, right? So in my career and the things that I've learned over the last 20 years of being an entrepreneur and operating companies is that at the end of the day, right, you become what you tolerate. That is a 100% absolute fact. So let me explain and let me rewind back to about 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and give you guys some perspective. And I'm going to give you guys an actual true story. I'm going to withhold names just out of respect for the people that I'm going to be talking about. So roughly about 10, 12, I would say it's actually longer than that. It's been about 13 years, actually, maybe even 14. I had people working for me at that time that I knew personally, right? Friends, relatives, specifically. The situation really boiled down to, all of those things kind of wrapped up into one, but specifically one particular individual that I had working for me was a best friend that I had. And me and him had a blast, right? Really great to be around, super fun. The guy is a million laughs a minute, man. The guy is just constantly making jokes and really super lighthearted and really kind of always lightens the mood, right? Anyway, so I hired him, been working for me for a while. And what I started to realize and what kind of came to light over time is I started to realize that my business wasn't getting as much traction as I wanted it to, right? Like when I first started back in 2006 or 2007, I noticed that my first 5 years in business, like we were like doubling and tripling business every year, right? Like we got out with, and I started with nothing, by the way. And, we're 1 million, 2 million, 4 million, you know what I mean? Like we were just really scaling at a very rapid pace the first 4 or 5 years. Well, so I started to ask myself, like, really, what's the difference? Like, what is the difference between my first 4 or 5 years and then consequently my last 3 to 4 years that I've been in business, where my business kind of stagnated, right? We really kind of were in the same place. It almost felt like we were spinning our wheels and we were just stuck in mud. Like everything was just moving slowly. We kind of every year, we set out a goal. We weren't hitting that goal. We didn't have the same traction and feeling that we had the first 5 years, right? And sure, some of that can be because, in the beginning it's exciting, it's new, you're kind of in business for yourself, and it almost seems not necessarily that you can't do anything wrong, but as long as you're putting in a lot of energy, extensively in your business, it almost seems to kind of start to duplicate itself over time. And, the reality is you start with zero, there's not, can't fall any further, right? Like we were at zero. So everything seemed like it was just an absolute lightning. And then it was, we were doing really well. So I started to analyze really what was happening around that time. Why is it that we felt that we were getting no traction? Why did we feel like we were stuck in mud? And I started to analyze, and as I started to analyze all of these things, one thing consistently kept creeping up in the surface, right? And what kept creeping up was the fact that there seemed to have been this sense of just complacency, right? And along with that sense of complacency, everyone kind of started to have an attitude of like, we're just here to have a good time. We're here to laugh. We're here to have lunch together every time at 12 o'clock. And, we leave the office from 12 to 1 and everything was a joke and everyone's having fun and, kind of million laughs a minute. And we're talking about what we're going to do for the weekend. What did you do for the weekend? What do you have going on tonight? And so forth and so on. And what I started to realize, painfully, unfortunately, was that the driver of that was that I actually had handed over kind of not necessarily fully the operating of the company to this buddy of mine. I had handed over kind of some of the sales related items and some of the stuff that we were doing with some of the clients at that time. And what I started to notice that was really difficult for me was I noticed that my company started to take on kind of that exact same tendency and attitude. And it, kid you not, it hit me like a ton of bricks that my business really became who he was, right? As a, not necessarily as a person, but the way he carried himself, his tendencies, his very kind of nonchalant, everything is funny, we're joking around kind of type feelings, right? And the way he carried himself, my company really became almost a byproduct of all of those things that he actually was. Where in the first 5 years, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not for everybody, right? And I understand that. I am definitely not. I am aggressive, constant moving. Nothing's ever good enough. I'm pushing all the time. If we get to here, why didn't we get to there? I celebrate wins very little, by the way. I mean, I kid you not. You know, one of my companies, we just landed a $2.5 million account that we just launched last week. As a matter of fact, I was in Miami last week, or this week. I just got back. We landed a $2.5 million account, and I kid you not. You know, there was a couple high fives, a couple handshakes, and it was right back to work. Right, it was right back to business. And we celebrated for about 5 minutes, and that was it. Everybody was like, "Hey, okay, what's next? Back to work." And the reason that they have the attitude is because I'm deeply embedded into that company, right? I am the CEO of that company, and I'm deeply embedded into all of the workers in that company. So the attitude that they have is the same attitude that I have, because they know that Jimmy's not going to celebrate for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Jimmy's going to celebrate very quickly and give everyone a high five and tell everyone good job. And then you already know what he's going to ask you. He's going to ask you, awesome, what's next? That's what I'm going to ask. Great. How do we keep the traction going? What's next? What's the next deal? What are we working? How do we make those? They know that already. So the celebration for a $2.5 million account was literally 5 minutes. And then one of my operating directors, my national performance director, literally said, "Okay, boss, what's next?" That's what he said. I didn't say it. He said it because he already knows that is the attitude that we take. Because again, I run that company, right? I run the day-to-day operations of that company. So anyways, to circle the wagon, I noticed that my company at that time had shifted from my attitude and the way that I operate and kind of the go, what's next, stacking wins, you know, on top of each other, right? How many wins can we stack a week, right? On top of each other to that equal to a big win, right? Not one big win, because that's just not the way businesses work, unfortunately. You're going to have a lot of micro wins stacked on top of each other that then are going to equate to a big win, right? So my company had shifted from the attitude of, hey, Jimmy's next mentality, what's next mentality, to very lackadaisic. What are we doing for the weekend? What are we eating for lunch? 1 hour lunches turn into 2 hour lunches. And then before you know it, no traction. And this was very, very painful for me, only because I am naturally a giving person. I'm not a taker, I'm a giver. I like to give. I spend a lot of time worried about, if you want to call it that, worried about what I can achieve for other people. Like, what can I do to help that person get to that place they want to be? And in the process of doing that, if there is any return for me, awesome. If there isn't, I'm okay, and I'm more than happy just seeing them win. It makes me feel good that I helped them get to that place where they wanted to be, right? So slowly but surely, I let that infest my company, and before you know it, my company had now assumed that attitude, not of me, but of my buddy and my friend who isn't a what's next type of guy. Right? It was very lackadaisic, and everything just came to a screeching halt. So how did I fix it? Well, it's unfortunate, because this is one of the tough lessons that I had to learn. You become what you tolerate. I became a byproduct of that lackadaisic attitude. I became a byproduct of what my company had become because I let him operate that way. I became a byproduct where all of a sudden I wasn't pushing, right? I wasn't coming into the office and the attitude was no longer what's next, what's next, what's next. The attitude was more like, hey, what are we having for lunch? What are we doing over the weekend? So because of that, unfortunately, I had to had a sit down with him to let him know, like, hey, we just can't operate this way. We're stuck in mud, right? Like we're just not scaling. We haven't scaled in the last couple years. We're kind of stuck where we are. We kind of probably went backwards a little bit because we had lost some clients. And we are making less money now than we're making then. But just the overall kind of energy of the company was that of, again, not what's next, but just kind of stuck there. And, we kind of fly by the seat of our pants. So I had to sit down. I had to have a conversation with him. And as much as he tried, again, back to some people are just not built that way. Unfortunately, doesn't make him a bad person. And it doesn't mean he did it on purpose, and it doesn't mean that he was trying to be malicious. It just means that he's just not built that way, right? Like I failed him, by the way, by putting him in the wrong position, and by asking him to give me and provide me something that, to be quite frank with you, he couldn't really provide me because he's just not built that way. So that was my mistake, and I failed him massively in that. I should have never put him in that situation, in that position. I should have put someone else in that position because he's really a follower, not a leader. And then that leader could have then possibly done something with that and really put him in a position to succeed by hopefully, leaning in on some of the stuff that he was good at. So anyways, so I had to sit down. We had a conversation. He tried to change his ways. We tried a million different ways to get him to where we needed him to be. And really, at the end of the day, unfortunately, it just got to a point where it was just uncomfortable. It was obvious that he was not going to be able to provide the things that we were looking for. He was not going to be able to change unfortunately, his habits and his daily tendencies really weren't changing at all. And it really got to a point where although he worked for me, I'm really the one that had to go in and retake the reins of my company, go back and very slowly, because it's, again, everyone gets used to doing business that way. I had to go back and I had to go start doing the day-to-day habits, the day-to-day tendencies, the day-to-day talks and meetings and bouncing from office to office and talking to the employees so that everybody understood that we were no longer going to do business that way. And I had to shift the culture back to a what's next culture within the company. And then once you start to get one guy on board and all of a sudden you got 2 guys and 3 guys and 10 guys and 15 guys, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you very slowly, again, you stack micro wins on top of each other. So I started to stack little micro wins on top of each other, getting people to start back to thinking that way. And then before you know it, you had, 20 plus employees that were now back on that bus, right? They were back on the bus of, hey, what's next, boss? What do we got to do? Let's keep it moving. And the minute we got to that point, it just became very uncomfortable for him. And unfortunately, although I tried everything I could, I ended up really losing in 2 avenues, right? The first avenue that I lost was I lost a lot of revenue, and unfortunately I lost 3 years of my life, in my company's life and my company's traction and the ability for my company to grow. And then in the process of losing those 2-3 years from my company, unfortunately, I also lost my best friend at the same time because I had to let him go. And if you've ever had anybody work for you that's your friend, no matter how many times you tell them, hey, this is business, and although I want to see you here forever, if I have to let you go, you understand what that looks like. It's never personal. No matter how many times you actually have that conversation, when you actually have to go do it, right? The reality is there are emotions involved, and no matter how many times you said that, there are always going to be emotions involved. Emotions, unfortunately, are a very powerful thing for some people. And unfortunately, I ended up losing him as a best friend. We really don't talk anymore. We hardly talk, hardly ever. We went golfing once in the last, I think 3-4 years or something like that. And we really don't put any more phone calls in, and ended up losing my best friend because of it, right? So that was a mistake on my part. Really 2 things. Number one, I probably should have never hired him in that capacity. And if I did hire him in that capacity, I probably should have never put him in that role. I should have found another role for him or put him somewhere else where I think his talents possibly would have been okay. But with that being said, both of those were my mistakes, so I take full responsibility for that. But again, that's the moral of the story. That again is painful for me because again, he was my best friend and we had been together for even before I became an entrepreneur, he had worked for me at my previous job. So we went back quite a while and spent a lot of time together. And I have a lot of some of the greatest memories I have of having a good time are with him, obviously. So it was really painful to understand that that was going to come to an end. And at the same token, obviously, just letting him go and knowing that he wasn't going to have a job is obviously something that's painful for me. Because again, I am a giver, not a taker. I like to give people and I like to see people win and succeed. So that was a tough pill for me to swallow. But anyways, positive of that was, to my point, the minute I got rid of that and some of the other toxicity that was happening within my company, and we went to a what's next kind of type back mentality of just driving that engine, all of a sudden company unsticks from the mud. Boom, we 3x revenue the next 2 or 3 years. And then again, that led to some of these other projects that we're working on. And my businesses have been way more successful since then by just changing the culture from the lackadaisic kind of relaxing culture to a, hey, what's next culture. What can we achieve? What do we got to do today? And ever since we've done that, obviously we've had the traction. So anyways, hopefully that's added some value to your day today. Hopefully you've never been in that situation, because that's a terrible situation to be in. But if you have, hopefully I've said something today that has hopefully put something in perspective for you. Or if you're going through that same situation, hopefully I'm able to help you out. Anyways, with that being said, I really appreciate your time. I hope you have a very blessed day. Peace.